Okay, here we go. Now we're going to talk about bow fishing today and setting up for it. So here's your standard bow fishing arrow. It's a little different from arrows you hunt with or target shoot with because it's solid fiberglass to take the abuse. The flights are set a little bit farther ahead, and there's a little hole right here for a line. Now this one came from the factory with a fancy harpoon head that exploded the third or fourth time I used it when I hit a rock. So I had to figure out a better way to do things. Now this is what's left of the factory head. It was a good metal collar. And what I did was grind it off flat with a grinder, then cut a metal disc, and I'll show you it says cut it with cut a leather disc, cut a leather disc, grind it off flat, and then contact cement the leather disc onto the end of this to help absorb the shock. Now, you can't see it on this one because it's so old, but there's a leather disc that got flattened into there. Hopefully you can see that. So, that's the first step. Now, the second step is how to replace the point. The first thing you gotta do is find yourself some brass tubing. And it comes in a lot of sizes. That's why I use brass, and it's flexible. It's got a lot of give. And what you want is brass tubing that just fits. That one's a bit snug because I've used it a few times. Or that one's a bit loose. But you can get it to fit pretty snug. And how you cut the brass tubing is with a tubing cutter. This is all you need to do. Anything I'm going to show you here today is a standard tubing cutter. So, well, that one fits a little better, a little tighter. Well, there's a good tight one. That's what you want is to fit like that. Okay, so that's the first step, is make yourself, because it's going to take some abuse. Bow fishing is basically shooting into the ground, the bottom of the river. So, you want to set it up so it'll take some abuse and things will, so that's the first part. Make yourself a brass tube. Now, you get a standard arrow and you cut off the end of it. See that? That's a standard arrow there. You just cut off the end of it with the machining, the aluminum piece for taking the arrowhead. So that's the next thing you do. And then you wind it with a little bit of masking tape so that it just fits inside the brass. Well, that one might be a bit old. Hold on. That's enough to make this one fit. Not a bit too much masking tape on there. Okay, that's what you want. Is so that fits like that. Now, you take one of these standard plumbing pieces like that, and you reshape it a little bit. And then you get a field point. There's an ordinary field point. You get a field point, and this little bit you got set off. You take this. You might have to widen the hole a bit on this. I think I had to do it for this one. Yeah, you gotta widen the hole a bit. So, and then you attach that like that. And there you go. That's your tip for fishing. And now you want to put this brass so it's just over the collar, and then sink this all the way in. And there, you're good to go. You got a good fishing tip. Now, I'll show you how to rig that. Now, like I said, it's going to take some abuse. So, make a few of these. Take them along in your pocket when you're out fishing or wherever, your bag. Now, you can try some different versions. These are pretty much the same thing. Let me show you this one. It's just a broadhead. Oh, crap, I can't get it off. These ones are just ordinary broadheads that you take, but you dull these off. I don't know if you can see it there. Leave this sharp, but dull the last bit off. The idea is you want to initially cut a hole in the fish, but at some point you want to stop cutting a hole and you want the fishing head to spread the hole wide without cutting it, so that it closes back in after the point goes through. So there's another setup. That's a different sort of point you can do. You can do this one. And let's see, all the work with a tubing cutter. And this is another one, if you want a little more drastic version, maybe a little bigger fish. This, you can take a medium-sized fish, 3 pounds and up. At some point, they're too small for archery fishing. The arrow pushes them out of the way instead of going through them. So 3 pounds and up. And I've taken up to, I don't know, 12, 15 pound pike with this point. I've actually never tried this one. This one's been working well enough. This was my second idea when I made this one up. In case that didn't work, I'll use this, but this worked out really well. Now, if you want a little more drastic penetrating power, you might want to do something like that. So, that's the system. And now, spear fishing, bow fishing, ideally, you always want the point to disengage after it goes through the fish, or into the fish or through it. You want it to disengage from the arrowhead of the shaft. And that's because, that's for a few reasons. It saves the arrow getting beat up from the fish thrashing around. When you first hit the fish with an arrow or a spear, it's going to react very vigorously to that initial shock. And this is a pretty heavy arrow, and the spears are even heavier. And if the fish has got that to pull against, all that inertia, it's easier to pull the arrow out. So if it disengages, well, all that's let go and the tip is more likely to stay in. So that's why I came up with the system where the tip disengages for whichever ones you use. I don't know if this will fit. The tape seems to have spelled over the years. When I use it, usually I find, if I pick a good fitting piece of brass, usually I find after I shoot, the brass stays with the arrowhead, and sometimes it even pushes back right off the back of it, or flat and level. So there again, you want to just see that brass sticking out, put your finger there instead of the steel head, put that in, and there, you're good to go again. You hit the fish, it pulls out. It's more likely to turn the head sideways too when the tip engages for any of them. Okay, so that's it for the tips. I don't want to go on too long here. And modifying the factory tip you get. Now, we're going to do rigging it all. This is the arrow. Somewhere I got into my fishing line. Okay, this is the bow line. Oh yeah, here's the bow reel. Here's your standard bow reel. Here's your standard bow reel. There's a place to keep them all together. Bring it all together in one nice tidy place. I'll show you how to set that up, but first we start with the arrow. And we do a very simple knot, but one that's really effective. We need, just estimating this here. Need about that much. Okay, the kind of knot I do is double it up like that. Bring it around. Okay, very simple knot. It's actually a bit big for what I'm going to do. Do that. Okay, let's try to make that a little smaller. Okay, that's better, I guess. It's a very strong knot. And you might want to do another one. The arrow is the most important part. You don't want to lose that. You can lose any of that stuff. You got spares, you can replace it. But the arrow, the shaft is what's really important. You only got one of those. So you want to make sure you don't lose that. And I'm showing you how to do that. Both ends. Okay. That's how you set that up. Well, I got me a little needle I made here to thread the shaft. It's just a piece of wire bent with a sharp bend. So put that through there. We put that. Now let me think about this. Yeah, we want to do it that way. Okay. Don't string this careful. Okay, we'll just leave that there for now. Let me clear this stuff away. I want to show you something. Okay, this isn't a full-sized bow, but I got it for this demonstration. Okay, now, this is like any other arrow. There's different colored flights. You knock this one on the outside of your bail. So we knock that. Okay, now, when you want the line to come out, so it doesn't get in the way, hit the bail or anything, you want the line to go up this side like that. So we'll pull this through part way. Now we gotta go looking for the other end of the line. I think we're almost there. As for amount of line, you want to wind as much onto your bow reel as you can in just one layer. Okay, so that's the way that's set up. We pass this through that end. Pull, 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 pull. Okay, now knock it back in there. Mount it back in the bow. You want everything to be on this side, away from the bow, away from the, well, you want everything, all your rigging to be on this side. So we pull this through. Okay, there we go. That's pretty good. Now you can see how that's going to go. Okay, take away a little needle. Okay, so much for attaching the arrow. You might want to put a little bit of super glue there or something. I may do that just so it stays. It stays in the spot there. I might maybe put a dab of super glue there to make sure it stays there. Okay, so that takes care of that.